Hey everyone, and welcome back to Fake Figure Wrestling News, or Fed News, if you will, for the October 24th edition. Let's get started. So the first thing is I've taken the champions out of each brand to kind of cut down the slides a little bit. But this week on Superstars, Bob Backlund would defeat Doink the Clown. The $1 Million Man and Andre defeated Mr. T and Hulk Hogan in a tag team action. Psycho Sid would defeat Bob Orton Jr. And also call out Ultimate Warrior, who would not show up, but basically has decided he wants to become the next WWF Heavyweight Champion. Iron Sheik defeats Bret Hart in his debut, and in the main event, LOD defeats Razor Ramon and Diesel in non-title action. Over to SmackDown, WCW, and it was Starrcade this week, so therefore we saw a pay-per-view card instead of a normal match with Terry Funk defeating Larry Zbyszko in the opener. Warlord and Marty Jannetty went to a time-limit draw. The Great Muta and Jake Roberts defeated Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard for the WCW World Tag Team Championships. Randy Savage would defeat Rick Rude. Barry Windham would defeat Ricky Steamboat for the WCW World Television Championship. Ric Flair would go on to defeat Lex Luger for the WCW United States Championship. And in the main event, Sting would defeat the Giant for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Over to Raw now, and Austin Theory would defeat the Boogeyman. Shelton Benjamin defeats Matt Riddle in their debuts. Roman Reigns would defeat Shinsuke Nakamura, while Drew McIntyre would squeak out a victory over The Rock. Randy Orton and Edge would defeat Cody Rhodes and John Cena in the main event. Now over to SmackDown. The Fiend would debut and defeat Scotty 2 Hotty. Rob Van Dam would end up defeating Chris Benoit in a great match. Apollo Crews and Xavier Woods making their debut against Eddie Guerrero and Batista went to a double countout, unfortunately. And Stone Cold would defeat Booker T. The main event saw the debuting Finn Balor defeat Brock Lesnar. Over on AEW Collision, the Dark Order defeats Best Friends. Ricky Starks would defeat Jake Hager. Death Triangle defeat Private Party and Matt Hardy. And in the main event, Malachi Black defeats CM Punk and Bryan Danielson. Over to AEW Dynamite, Jurassic Express would defeat Darby Allin and Dustin Rhodes. The Young Bucks would defeat SCU. The Butcher and the Blade continue undefeated as they defeated Ortiz and Santana. And in the main event, saw Wardlow defeat Powerhouse Hobbs. Over to the new show of AEW Rampage, Wheeler Yuta and Shawn Spears would defeat Andrade and Danhausen. Adam Cole defeats Samoa Joe. Jon Moxley and Lance Archer ended a time-limit draw. And in the main event, Hangman Adam Page defeats Brian Cage. Over on NXT now, Wesley and Nash Carr would defeat Otis and Rick Boogs. Eli Dragunov, Kushida, and Carmelo Hayes defeats Ali, T-Bar, and Mace. Baron Corbin would defeat Bronson Reed, and in the main event, Solo Sikoa would defeat Omos to remain undefeated. There was no match week for WCW this week, or WCW Nitro, which is the NWCW, CWA also had no show this week. Velocity did have a match, or a card this week, which saw Cesaro defeat The Miz. MVP would defeat DDP, and in the main event, Bam Bam Bigelow defeats D'Lo Brown. Red Impact would not be wrestling this week. Blue Impact also not this week. But New Japan Pro Wrestling, Shingo Takai defeats Chuck Palumbo. Dick Murdoch would defeat Joey Mercury. In the main event, Zack Sabre Jr. and Sonata would defeat Mike Awesome and Chris Masters. AAA would not have a show this week. ECW would have a show this week. Tucker defeats Brian Pillman. Tensai would defeat Bo Dallas. Santino Marella would defeat Curtis Axel. In the main event, Chavo would defeat Kurt Angle with outside interference from Tensai. WWE CW had no show this week. Oops, there was also no show there this week. Excite was also not having a show this week. The CWF did have a show this week as the Bushwhackers would defeat Tito Santana and Gerald Briscoe. Hillbilly Jim defeats Nikolai Volkov. In the main event, Mabel would defeat Typhoon. There's no show for TNA this week, or the NWA, or the Independent Wrestling Federation. Ring of Honor, though, did have a show, and they actually had a new champion crowned. Juice Robinson would defeat Scott Norton. Sanjay Dutt defeats Blue Meanie. Rocky Romero defeats Flip Gordon. In the main event of OROH Television Championship would be Bull James defeating Chris Candido to win that belt. There is also no shows this week for NXT Minor League, GHC, or All Japan Pro Wrestling. However, the UWF would debut and have Killer Kowalski and Jesse Ventura defeat Mr. Fuji and Original Sheik. The main event would see Bad News Brown defeat Chief J Strongbow. Currently, nothing else was scheduled this week for those other brands, and there's no results for this week as well. So that's the end of the week. We have new champions. Bull James winning the television championship. Barry Windham winning the WCW World Television title. Great Muta and Jake Roberts winning the WCW World Tag Team Championship. Ric Flair would win the United States Championship of WCW. And Sting would win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Over in wrestling news, Buddy Murphy has signed with SmackDown. His debut is pending. It still has not yet arrived yet. Sabu has, of course, signed with the WCW. And 6 superstars have signed. However, the names have not been released yet, but once we find out them, they will be breaking news. Stay tuned for that. But 6 people, these are people who potentially could be in Ultimate or Elite form, so they could be heading to Red Impact or Blue Impact. One of them is scheduled to head to the WWF, so stay tuned and find out who those are. When we find out, we'll let you know. We'll see you next week for the Halloween edition of Fig Fed News.